Welcome to the OKD Community Development Meeting for November 29th, 2022. And take a quick look at the agenda, see if there's anything that has been missed or that you'd like to add or move around for any reason. Let's take 30 seconds and look at that and let me know if there's anything that you'd like to change. All right, anything that folks want to change, move around, add, remove in terms of the agenda? Okay, seems like we're good to move forward. So technical documentation, Brian, take it away.
Okay, so haven't heard anything about the SNO. I know you're involved in that, Luigi. I don't know whether you've got an update.
Yeah, absolutely. I met this morning with Benjamin Branch. He calls himself Dwayne. So I was a bit confused because all his emails is Benjamin Branch, and then he says, "Oh, this is Dwayne," you know. And so anyway, so we did meet this morning. So we have a plan forward. On Friday, we're going to be setting up the initial environment, you know, going through a document I've created, work through it, and then once we've got the whole sort of setup worked out, and installation of OKD Working up and running in single node using the UPI methodology, we would then create a video. So I mean, I've already started on the introduction of the video, and you know, created a set of slides. So it's just getting Dwayne up to speed. You know, he says there's some things he's not sure about, so we're going to go through that. And so yeah, we're making progress there. So that's great. He's fairly available. I think Friday in Qatar. He's based in Qatar. It's a holiday there. I didn't realize that. So it's his Saturday really. So he doesn't mind working there. So we'll get that going.
Speaking of which, guess who joined us? Hello, Mr. Branch.
There he is. Yeah.
We can see you, but we can't hear you. But we see that you're walking. So, okay. I put a little note there that I have started working on the Tecton operator install. So just to reiterate, I'm going to start with just the basics, and then after a first version of the blog post, move on to doing the OpenShift modifications and including those. There is a separate repo that has those OpenShift editions, I think they're called, or something like that.
Yeah. It's the tasks. It's just the
right.
tasks and the
right.
Yeah.
Right. So I have started working on that. ETA is probably going to be, you know, like a week or two, because I've got a lot of other things on my plate, but I did start working on that.
So is that different to the Red Hat operator, or what's in the Red Hat catalog on OCP? Is that a different source or a different?
No, it should be the. I think it's the same source, and then they flip. I'll have to look at the repo again to see what it is, but you literally use a flag to have it install the OpenShift extras, basically. And interestingly enough, when I asked about, I reached out through a Red Hat person who reached out to like one of the product managers, and I said, hey, you know, it would be nice to have the pipelines operator available, he was like, well, you can install the community version of it. So their perception currently is that it's all you have to do is install the community version and then flip some switches and have the other content. I need to verify that actually with my hands before I commit to that being the case, though, right? Okay, anything else about technical documentation?
Just to say that we've had quite a lot of input into the tutorials and the let me put it there and paste the discussion thread. It's just put it in the chat on all the tutorials. There is a lot. There are a lot of links put in that discussion forum. So yeah, I mean, I guess the question is, where do we go from here in terms of, because I notice again, there's been some more chat this week where people are looking at 4.9 and back level versions because they're following tutorials, and instead of jumping to the latest, there's also been some questions about, well, why aren't we supporting back level versions? The assumption that we're following the OCP model and applying fixes to back level versions. So I think there is, although these are really, really useful, and that's how I got started by finding an old one, it is causing confusion where people are picking up old versions and they're not getting the updates. And so I do think we have to come up with a plan of at least having a set of up-to-date tutorials or videos or how-tos beyond the documentation. So I say the documentation is great once you've done it once and you understand it. But as a first timer, I found the documentation a little bit impenetrable in terms of just what you put where in terms of the configuration, what some of the configuration parameters mean. It doesn't really explain what the parameters are there for. And there was a little bit of head scratching that a video resolved. So whether we can update the documentation or whether we just have good how-tos. But at some point, we've got to turn this list of resources into an action plan.
So do we feel that there's enough there to at least sift through it for current links, to at least have a list of current example tutorials that we can provide to people?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. I mean, if you look through, and we've got the age of them as well. So there's quite a lot from 1 or 2 years ago. There's quite a few from 3-4 years ago. So yeah, I think we've got enough to make a good start there.
Do you want me to try to put how long they are, how many views they've gotten, and more details on them? Or
I mean, one thing I was going to ask Jamie is, do you have the results of the survey? Do we know what platforms everyone's using? Because I think that would give us a clue as to where we should be focusing our effort, because with sort of OpenStack, Overt, Bare Metal, VMware, and then we get into the cloud providers, there's a lot of different potential, different options. And I don't think we've got the bandwidth to do them all justice. So it'd be useful to think, to actually know, from the survey, is there 1 or maybe 2 platforms that we could concentrate on to get a majority of the user population?
Yeah, so Mike and I actually talked about this when we presented at KubeCon, and I haven't massaged all the data yet. But if I don't have the most recent download of the data right now, but as of the one I pulled in September, it was a surprising amount of 410. And I don't know if this is like self-selection, that the people who bothered to do it, but a lot of 410 as of some of these responses are July, August, September, and like 2 4.6s, and this was out of like 40 some odd responses. So,
but I'm guessing once you've done the initial install, you're going to pick up the updates, which will then bring you up to date. So even if you do a 4.9 today, you will get the update tree, won't you? Is that true?
well, select releases can, right? So select releases have edges that'll work with it. And if you look at the output of the pipelines, you can see that where they are and which ones you can transition to the next minor version up.
Right, and the cluster should tell you that.
Bugs, though. Yeah, the cluster should tell you that. There have been known bugs, though. Like there was a bug, I guess it was about 1.5 years ago, was it? Was it from Bruce might remember. I think it was from 4.8 to 4.9 or something like that, where we struggled for a while for folks to be able to go from, or maybe it was 4.8 to 4.9 or 4.9 to 4.10, where folks really struggled. And we didn't have that release to be able to go up to the next minor version.
Okay, and does the survey have what platform they're running on, like VMware or?
Yeah, let me, let's see here. How did we do it?
Because I'd be interested to know, are majority using IPA or UPI? And then what are the key platforms? Because that'll give us some areas as to where we should spend our effort.
Yeah, let me put this in. I put it in a Google spreadsheet and shared it out to the folks like a while ago, but it's not the most up to date. So let me pull the data again and put it into a spreadsheet. Yeah, because I'm not seeing off the top of my head anything that I can tease out just while we're talking. You know what? We didn't actually ask that. Maybe we should ask that, because I'm looking now at the questions and we didn't ask what platform they were actually using.
Okay.
Do we want to add that moving forward? Should we sort of cull the responses up to a point and then add that question?
I think that'd be useful because.
Oh, no, actually, hold on. No, actually, I'm wrong. We did.
Okay. And I thought we did.
Yeah, we did. It's been so long now. Yeah, interestingly enough, the majority are bare metal. So it's bare metal, then vSphere, then AWS, and then a smattering of like OpenStack and Overt and stuff like that. So bare metal has the most, then vSphere, then AWS, in that order.
Okay.
Just looking at it real quick. So, and that makes sense actually, because, AWS is sort of the easiest one to install, and it's the one that's tested the most before it makes it out the door. So it's folks might not feel a need to take the survey or say anything because they don't really have any gripes about it because it's the easiest. So
yeah, I'm guessing they're going to be more commercial backed as well, because I think OKD on AWS is quite heavy for a personal home lab environment in terms of cost.
Yeah,
so
I did a OKD install, and just a base install ends up being like, it was like $358 or something like that if you didn't like reserve your instances. Now, if you reserve them, obviously you could get that price down maybe, but it's pretty pricey, US dollars. So yeah, I mean, let's look at that. And then so what do we really want to tease out? I mean, if we look at what we have here, bare metal, which I think we kind of already knew that, right? Like bare metal is the thing that people really want the help with. And it was the one that about 2 years ago when I first got involved, there was some hesitance to do a lot of documentation for bare metal because it was so unique and each install was unique and whatever. But I think we've sort of moved away from that philosophy in the group. You know what I mean? And it seems like we probably want to do our best to support bare metal. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, this is Jack chiming in. So I just wanted to mention that just because it's like bare metal doesn't necessarily mean you're actually installing on hardware, right? I mean, you can. This is actually what we're doing at CERN. So we are actually just installing on our own VMs, and then kind of deploying our own cloud controller on top. So it kind of like OpenShift thinks it's a bare metal, but it's actually not. And I think if people might be doing this in their home labs or something like this, where maybe you're also just like using some nodes or you have like a VMware or whatever, then it's also going to look like a bare metal, or you're going to select bare metal in the survey. But well, it kind of is, but it's a little bit misleading. So maybe if we want to focus on that aspect, then like pulling out some interesting bits, like, okay, if you didn't deploy on one of the quote unquote supported platforms, how can you still automatically provision new machines and put them into your cluster? Or how can you still automatically provision storage, something like this, like kind of as a extension tutorials, like how to extend your own OKD. Because of course, if you just do the regular deployment that you just described on AWS, for example, you're gonna get everything out of the box. But then, yeah, that's those people, like you said, probably don't need much help.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea. If we can tease out a little bit the specifics of those, and then write stuff up or direct people to the specifics of adding nodes and whatnot. Yeah.
So I'm guessing if we did a good UPI on bare metal, then that could also satisfy a lot of virtualized platforms. Because as you said, you just create a bunch of nodes and then use them as if they were bare machines. Sorry, Mike, you got your hand up. I should be good.
No worries. It's a good discussion. I think we have to be a little careful here in terms of like the language we're using when we talk about bare metal versus kind of like what I would consider just a UPI install. Like, yes, UPI install is kind of like a bespoke installation, right? You're installing it on whatever custom machines you've created. But there's also what we call bare metal in terms of a platform type, and bare metal in terms of a platform type does allow some interaction with like some of the clustered lifecycle kind of stuff, where you're defining pools of bare metal machines that could be possible for growing the cluster and shrinking the cluster. And so I think my personal feeling is that when we're talking to our users, we should probably be careful to kind of first talk about the distinction between, are you just trying to do a bespoke installation on the hardware you have, and so you'd like to have OpenShift running? Or are you trying to do something that looks more like what we consider, like kind of a cloud-based installation, where you want to be able to use OpenShift to manage the underlying infrastructure, because then that, bare metal could be included in that as well, the official bare metal platform. And so I think like, if we're just telling users, okay, you have a handful of machines, here's how you install it on the machines you control. That's one really well-known pathway, and probably there's not a lot of commonality there. But if we start to talk about bare metal as the infrastructure platform, I think that's where it gets a lot more complicated, because configuring a bare metal like data center to look like an AWS installation, it is a more complicated task. And so I think, defining documentation for just doing a normal UPI install, that's good. And then also talking about this other distinction where it's like, okay, if you have infrastructure like vSphere or something like that, then we should start to look at, okay, what's the most popular like infrastructure deployment? Like I commented earlier, like, vSphere is very popular when you look at the telemetry around OpenShift, so it's like, okay, well, that might be a place to focus on if we can determine that our community is really into that as well. Maybe that's a good place to start. But I think it's a distinction we should probably make, for the users.
So that's getting into like the automated machine sets where the cluster can self-grow and self-manage resources. Yeah, okay.
I think Dwayne had a good point, which is really a glossary would be helpful for this, because there's this conversation about what is bare metal keeps coming up, right? And our users might not know, and we ourselves may not really know what we mean with this. So having a little something about bare metal and its different interpretations might be kind of helpful somewhere. And are you volunteering, Dwayne? Is that what I'm seeing? Okay.
You're on mute, Dwayne.
I volunteer for the glossary because you learn a lot. Being able to distinguish the terms. That's great learning.
All right,
Dwayne. Sorry, Jeremy. Just to say, if you want to sort of get so you can actually go and I don't know whether you've actually done anything on OKD.io, but if you want me to go through how that site's managed and how you add content, happy to do that. We can just ping me on Slack or something, and we can set some time up.
Okay. Yes, we can do that.
Excellent. Very cool.
That's it from me. I'll sort of take over half the
That was
meeting.
great. Larry, go ahead.
So one piece that I needed to understand, or rather loop back to your documentation issues, is that when I go back through and look at stuff, one case where I was having problems with node ports, trying to troubleshoot that, it said, oh, you have to have a Red Hat account, and you have to have pull requests for it and the like. And that, I'm wondering why that keeps on slipping through, or if we end up copying stuff from the Red Hat release to the next OKD release, and it never, we're continuing to have to go back and update those things.
Yeah, I think that this is it's a little bit of several things. So one of it is copying stuff over directly from the OCP documentation. The other is there are some resources that are not accessible if someone used the dummy pull secret. And the dummy pull secret was suggested, and then the idea was sort of backtracked, and they came up with an actual, I think, like a new pull secret that actually sort of works for OKD as opposed to just putting something random in there. So I think that's part of it. And then the other part of it is that a third component of that, I think, is that folks, we don't really have the OKD documentation at the level of things like node port and some of the networking and other stuff. Like, we've really always just sort of copied over from the OCP documentation. And I don't know that we can get into that level, because that changes a lot, right? Or could change a lot, and we'd have to maintain those docs. Do you remember what it was about node port? Was it access to a document or access to an image for something? Or
now the issue that I was having is that I had an OCP install and an OKD install of the same genre 4.9.
Sure.
And on OCP, the node ports work. On OKD, the node ports did not work. And through the VIP, ingress VIP.
Right,
if I went to the IP of the node ports worked. So I needed to figure out where that was, and the troubleshooting documents all pointed back to a image that you had to have special permissions to pull, and documented that you had to have a Red Hat service agreement and all that.
Was that the tools image?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I think I actually remember the conversation. Was it in Slack? I think there was a conversation about this.
Yeah.
Right. And having to pull that. Right. Yeah.
I finally got around to not putting in the doc request on that, but I never saw anything feedback on that. But it's still, there's random spots that I see. Matter of fact, you were talking about the fake pull request, pull secret. That's still in the docs.
Yeah.
So there's lots and lots of places that things are still out of sync with for people that are doing this all the time versus people that are just coming to it.
Well, but I think the fake pull secret actually is accurate. It's just that before it was a random pull
Right.
secret, and now it's a specific one.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
it has to be,
Yeah.
you know,
It has to pass
encoded and
validation.
so on. Yeah, it has to pass validation, right?
Yeah.
So
So there has to
we
be a
give you one.
yeah, there has to be a
Now-
pull secret included, and it has to pass the validation.
You know, and that's something, if I remember, Larry, there was a Fedora tools image that did work, right? That
Yeah, I
were
went
able to
through and
use that.
found one, but I couldn't remember how I got there when
Yeah,
I went to
I'd
do the
like to
doc
find that, because that
request.
would actually be one to write up and to put something in for Michael. Oh, Michael didn't show up yet today. Oh no.
Yeah.
So
So just to help Larry, I put a link in the chat. There is a sort of page on the OKD, which is how we try and get the official OKD docs updated. So it is pulling in a request. We need to update this page because it's still got Diane, but we need to copy Michael Burke on
Okay, well,
any
I
changes.
put it in on the GitHub page specifically, or the GitHub site for the docs.
yeah, that's good. That's exactly
Yeah,
where it should
that's
go,
where you
for
put
sure.
it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I followed that through.
Yeah.
So it went
All right.
into the docs repo.
All right, I'll make a side note to try to find that Fedora tools container again, because ultimately we should swap out the documentation and have that, because otherwise people do get stuck and they're not able to do the network testing that they want.
And another side note, it's interesting that once I had my all sorts of issues around my stuff, 4.9 not upgrading after a fresh install, because all sorts of pieces were saying, oh, these have been modified. It says, what? I didn't modify anything. The other piece that is really strange is that I've torn things down, and then now I can't get it to reinstall. It just blows up at Bootstrap, and I'm now struggling to figure that out.
Uh-oh.
Right. Well, you're probably going to have to rebuild your install kit, because at least there used to be a certificate that was part of that for the initial install, which only lasted like a day or so.
Yeah, you got to delete all those hidden folders
Right.
in your install directory that contain all of that.
Right.
Okay.
Just delete the whole directory.
Yeah, so I wrote a script that cleans it, but yeah, if you just delete the whole directory that you were doing your install from, because there's hidden files that contain certificates, a log. Yeah, exactly. They're hidden dot files, as Jack points out. So,
okay.
But put something in the Slack channel, in the OpenShift Slack channel, to remind us, and we'll jump on and help you out with that.
Okay.
Because that's something that bites people a lot, which actually, that's a missing documentation thing as well, right? I think it's buried somewhere, but it doesn't actually say, hey, if you have to redo this, delete that folder or delete all the hidden files. Right?
Well, the piece here is, if you're destroying the cluster, probably the destroy operation should delete the hidden pieces. Leaving the log files around isn't going to hurt, but the hidden pieces from a previous install is just going to bite everybody in the butt.
Yeah, that's a good point. That install state, OpenShift _install _state file, that's the one that's really the kicker in all of this. Okay, cool. So yeah, so put something in the channel if you want us to hash that out more. Happy to help you out on that, and we should put a note in for documentation on that one. This is something else, actually. It brings up, we don't have the FAQ like just available from the OKD.io site, do we? We don't have an FAQ. We've got the FAQ that's in the repo, but we don't actually link to it, and we haven't actually turned it into an HTML page. Is that something that folks are supportive of?
There is an FAQ in OKD.io in the hub section.
Oh, is there? Oh.
Yep.
Is that the one that was Ah, okay, it is. Okay, got
Yep.
it. I didn't, for some reason I wasn't seeing it. Okay.
I mean, we can
It doesn't
add it.
actually-
We can add it to the bottom. I mean, it's old. It's old. It has been updated for a long
It
time.
is really old. Yeah.
But I mean, we could actually put it as a top level menu item to make it more obvious, and put some gotchas in there until we get them properly fixed.
Okay.
Yeah,
And that's another one I would add is someone asked earlier today about the street, about selecting or just adding one of the other update streams, the fast stream, and so we had to explain, no, there's only one per minor version, one stream, and that would be a good FAQ to add as well, I think. Jack, go ahead.
Or fixing the docs that say OKD only has the stable stream.
Yeah, exactly. I
Are-
was going to say the same, and this should be put like in the FAQ, but also probably front and center in the README, because it's kind of, and on one hand it's unusual because like most open source projects that you use, like they will at least provide you kind of like some kind of fixes for previous minor releases. It's totally fine that OKD doesn't. Like I really understand that it's not really feasible, not easily feasible with all of the testing that is required, but it should just be pointed out very clearly that when people start using it, that they don't expect to get similar updates to what they would expect or what they could get when they're using, let's say, I don't know, CentOS 8 or CentOS Stream 9 or whatever, because there you would still get patch updates, which you don't get on OKD, and it's absolutely not clear unless you want to kind of parse the releases from the GitHub that's the case.
Yeah, that's a great point. And if Christian was here, I would ask if they feel that with the new infrastructure, we might be able to start providing patch updates to previous versions. That might be a question for next week's meeting. With all of the new infrastructure and the ease with which things are getting built now, maybe there will be an opportunity for that, but I don't know, we'd have to ask.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, infrastructure and testing is one thing, but then you also kind of need to support it, right? So if someone
Yeah.
comes along with like a 4.8 cluster and something is broken, and all of us, so to speak, are already using 4.10 or 4.11 or 4.12 with, I don't know, SCOS or whatever, then no one's really going to be able to help them except say, well, have a look at the docs or try this or try that. So I think it's perfectly fine to say, hey, we're just going to support one release at a time. I think it's a really reasonable strategy, especially because the people who are choosing OKD, I think they are somewhat willing to be on their own anyway, or to customize anyway.
it might be helpful then to have a very clear upgrade document. Like there's some stuff that was on the front page of the repo, and I don't know if it's still there, but I don't think we turned it into a doc that's basically like, this is how you pull down the latest tools, for a release, for the next release, and this is how you upgrade, or this is how you change, your stream, etc. So it'd be nice to actually have like, okay, we're on 4.11 now. To get to 4.11, here are the steps that you can follow to get there, and here are the versions that you need to be able to do that. To sort of tease that out, we've sort of relied on people going to the testing pages and the CI pages to sort of see where those edges are and stuff like that. But it'd be nice if we provided that or highlighted it for folks. I mean, we have to keep it updated. I'd be happy to volunteer to do that, but I think that would help our public interactions a lot, is for people to see like, okay, you're limited in this way, but this is how you get to the next version in these simple steps.
Yeah,
Oh, please
sorry,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, we do need to go and change the documentation, because I'm just looking now and updating clusters on OKD docs.okd.io, and it's got candidate channel, fast channel, stable channel. So this is the OCP stuff. So we do need to go in and get this updated.
Yeah.
because this is the Red Hat OCP.
Yeah.
It doesn't apply to OKD, so yeah, we need to get that removed.
All right, we'll get a ticket into Michael. He did show up, but then for folks that didn't catch it, 2 weeks ago, he did show up at the end of the meeting, but it was it last week? He did show up, but it was like an hour late. He showed up at 1 instead of noon. Jack, go ahead.
Yeah, just wanted to like kind of bring this back to a topic we had before about the telemetry or the survey. Do we have any data on who is actually using the official channel that is provided by OKD versus who is kind of rolling their own in terms of releases or cluster versions? Because we do, like, we never used any release channel. We're just building our own OKD versions and then just upgrading from point to point, basically. Which might be totally weird, but I don't know, maybe also a lot of other people are doing it. Don't really have any insight there.
One thing that I do know, and you know, Miko, you might be able to speak to this as well, is that the telemetry data, Vadim had access to it and could give us sort of generalized, well, this is what I've seen, but we can't make it public, or we don't have access to it as a group as of right now. I don't know, Miko, do you got any insight into that as well?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of why I was being a little delicate about how I was talking about the telemetry before. I think Vadim's approach is probably right. Like, I'm probably not allowed, or, you know, Luigi and I aren't allowed to talk about the actual numbers in the telemetry, but maybe we could talk about trends or something. So the other part about this too, especially to Jack's question, you know, we're still working towards the point where we're going to give more, like I've talked about this install flexibility effort in the past, like we're working towards providing more opportunities for users to be able to customize how OpenShift is deployed, especially with respect to the, you know, to these like infrastructure specific components. Right now, though, we don't have any sort of telemetry that shows us when people have done those kind of customizations or whatnot. So we really don't, you know, there's really no way to detect right now to say like, oh, you know, someone is running a cluster and they've added some sort of customization that will persist through upgrades. I think we're starting to see some of that with like the OLM and people who install things through the catalog, and we can see those catalog upgrades. But the type of customizations that I know you're doing at CERN and probably other people are curious about too, we don't necessarily have a good way to track that yet. And I think that's something we'll probably think about as this becomes a more popular kind of methodology to interact with OpenShift. You know, the install flexibility stuff, I mean.
Thanks, that was super helpful. Is that, Jack, does that help answer your question?
Yes, partially. It was more about that maybe we could also in the survey like gather this type of data, like, hey, are you using the OKD stable channel, or do you do something else? Just
Sure.
as a general sentiment, like I totally understand that like we don't want to have all of the glory details of the telemetry, especially because I'm not sure on how many OKD installations that actually works, because it doesn't on ours. And I've never spent any time figuring out why. I thought it was just because we're not using OCP, to be honest.
Jack, can I hand that to you as a task? Can you write up a question that that asks succinctly what it is that you're getting at, and then we'll throw it into the form for the survey?
Sure thing. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Anything else on this topic? Boy, we were all over. This was good. A lot of great stuff. All right, moving on. Still, I emailed OSPO last week, still no response. I will email again. It's a little bit frustrating. I realized last week might have not been a good week for US folks, but OSPO also has some non-US folks, so I was kind of hoping for a response. So let me email them once again this week, and then if we don't hear anything in 2 weeks from now at our next meeting, maybe we got to think about alternatives, because it was nice for them to initially say that they were going to help us out, but at this point it's a couple months later and it's like, well, we really could use some emails, some email addresses, right? So social media.
Did you
Oh,
also
yeah, go
reach
ahead.
out to Karine?
No, we did not do that in terms of this, but we can do that for sure.
I thought there was we wanted to invite her to one of the OKD meetings at some
We
point.
will, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think the goal was to shoot for after December, because a lot of folks are going to be out starting next week because of the Red Hat holiday. What is, you guys get like a whole month or something like that, isn't it? Or like at least a couple weeks of like not working.
It's just a week. It's just a week.
Oh, okay.
Well, from us, I don't know about you, Amika. I'm not sure.
Nah, same for me, just a week. I like what Jamie's talking about though. Where do I sign up for that?
Right.
Yeah, we
exactly.
missed something somewhere.
Okay, so yes, and we will invite, I think for January, or do folks think it's okay to invite in December? Some folks are really busy in December, but if folks want to do that invite and have it be maybe the next meeting, because we only have two in December, right? We've got the 13th. Actually, we should answer this now. Do we want to have a meeting on the 27th? Because if not, then we only have one meeting next month. So what do folks think?
I mean, I would vote to skip it personally, but it's just me.
Yeah, so would I, actually.
Probably nothing much
Okay.
is going to happen in the week or two before anyway.
Yeah. So then I think this points to either invite to the next meeting or wait until and invite for a January meeting. Invite for January meetings, that's sort of, I think, yeah, okay.
I mean, it probably makes the most sense to invite Karina to try and come to the community development meeting first, because this meeting's a little lower bandwidth than the other one. We could, we could talk more about community stuff with her, and then, if she wants to also participate in the other meetings too, that's awesome.
Sure, yeah. All right, well, let's shoot then for, we'll do the invite for the, what would that be? That would be, so we're skipping, we would skip the 27th, so it'd be the 10th. Let's invite her to the meeting on January 10th. Does that sound good? Or just in January, one of the January ones starting on January 10th. That's probably good. Okay. So, okay, social media, I've been tweeting about releases and some of the videos. I'll tweet more of the video stuff. One thing that came up in the last meeting was Mastodon. And what do folks think? Do we want a presence on Mastodon?
Jamie, I was chatting to, just before this meeting, I was just catching up and syncing up with Diane, and she said we should bring it up because it sounds very interesting. Maybe set up an account. I think the more important one she mentioned is getting the email alias so that we could have some form of email to point to for control of Mastodon and maybe even Twitter. So yeah, from my perspective, I think it's a good idea. I don't know what the rest of the guys think.
Yeah. Well, we're in a situation where if the email thing doesn't resolve itself soon with OSPO, we'd kind of have to register our own domain, right? Like OKD Proj or something like that, so, but that's a big step. And I don't know, no one really investigated if Red Hat would be cool with that or not. Like, that's the other part of this is like, okay, we create a whole new domain in email world aside from OKD. Is that cool with them or not? I mean, it is a community project, but it's also a community project supported by Red Hat pretty heavily. So
I feel like this is where it would be great to get some advice from the Fedora people. They've done such a good job with like building that kind of foundation. It's like, what would, because like we can keep like, I'm sure Luigi and I can keep bugging people in the OSPO to see if they'll like answer the question here, but that's, it doesn't really give us the power to do what, it doesn't give the community the power to kind of like choose their own destiny, right?
Well, and OSPO said they would do it, but then they said, well, we'll check with Red Hat elsewhere within Red Hat to make sure that this is going to conflict with such and such, and then they never got back on that part of it. So they actually offered, which kind of made this complicated, because if they just said no, we don't know, or whatever, but they offered and said they would do it, and then they wanted to check something, and then they just never got back. So yeah, I think let's, at the next meeting, we'll come up with a plan with how to move forward. I'll try OSPO one more time. And so in terms of Mastodon, do we wait to set one up until we have a separate email, or do we set it up with, there is a Gmail that Brian and I have the credentials to that we use for the Twitter. Should we use that? And I haven't delved into Mastodon yet, so I don't know how it is. It email based for accounts, or
you can. So the thing to know about Mastodon is that like it's decentralized. So like there's a lot of different servers. So the first thing we'll have to do is kind of find a server that we, the community is happy with. And there are some like open source based servers that are probably more appropriate than others, and there are some large instances too, like, that might be appropriate. So like then you just use an email to create your account. Once your account is created though, like you could change the email later or whatever. That wouldn't necessarily be important to us. But like, so like the first thing would be to choose is like, are we going to be like, at OKD project or whatever it is on, use the same handle as Twitter, but just move us, put it on a Mastodon server, and then set up some replication between the two, Twitter and Mastodon side. And then on the Mastodon side, you have to start getting into like, okay, then connecting to other servers and whatnot, connecting people's feeds. That'll be a little slower process than it is on Twitter, because the discoverability isn't quite the same. But we can navigate through that process. And I think the big deal is like just making sure that we choose a server that's pretty large and doesn't have like a crazy amount of block lists or whatever associated with it. Like that'll be kind of the biggest thing for us to do, I think.
Okay. Who's our resident Mastodon expert?
I mean, I use it very frequently, so I know a lot about it. I don't know if I'd call myself an expert, but
okay, who's the most expertise? Who has the most expertise in this group about Mastodon? Let me rephrase that. I think it's you.
It's sounding like me. Saying. Yeah, totally.
Would you be willing to take this on as
I'd be willing to help out.
At least let us know what pieces we need to do. Okay.
Yeah, I think probably, like I could help out at least in terms of suggesting some servers, and then like the community could kind of vote on which ones we think we want to be on or something like that.
Okay. All right. Brian, do you have any thoughts?
I've not actually used it because I went to sign up and I hit the first issue that Mike said, where do I go sign up? Which server do I want? And I went down the rabbit hole of looking at the servers and never actually signed up anywhere. So
what's Fedora doing? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
So yeah, I think that's the biggest one. And then also maybe we do need to provide some guidance. So community members that want to sign up, maybe suggest. I mean, I went down, do I use a regional based one, or do I use a technology based one? What are the pros and cons? And I never really got to the bottom of it. Yeah, so.
And this was kind of my concern, as I know, and Brian, in the past, you've sort of voiced a concern about us spreading ourselves thin across different, different communications channels and stuff like that. My concern is, okay, if we getting that synchronization in place so that what we put on Twitter, what we put on Facebook, what we put on whatever, they're all the same or as close to the same as possible. So we're not, reinventing the wheel every single time. That's one aspect. And then the other aspect is people being able to get to us there. And do we support people getting to us there, or do we just say, well, we're there, find your way there, or if you happen to be there? Do we have a role in helping people get on these platforms, which we're saying, I mean, because I haven't gotten on the other service that we set up in like months. I don't even know if anyone's using it. So
as I said, that's the problem. If we have a presence, we do have to service that presence. Right. And I think we're a small community. We're trying to push everything to that one GitHub discussion group and have all the conversation there. So the more channels that we have, the more frustration we're likely to give. And we saw that when we were actively using the Google sort of group. We had 2 Slack channels. We had the Git channel. We had people wanting a response and just broadcasting everywhere. And we had the same person sort of putting 6 messages on 6 different channels because they wanted a response and they weren't sure where they got a response from. So they just spammed everything. And that then caused some upset within the community. And so I think we yes, it's nice to sort of say people can follow us where they are. But I think what we want to do is we don't want to proliferate that we'll support you where you are. We'll tell you about things where you are. But if you want to come talk to us, come and talk to us at this place. And I think that's what we have to try and achieve with all these different channels.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. Like looking at so actually it's the first time that I'm looking at the Twitter presence now of OKD, to be honest. I mean, looking at the things that are being announced there, they're kind of interesting, but it also seems like a relatively big commitment to keep that up. And yeah, like Brian was saying, not sure if we actually can or want to do that in the long run. But then the question is, where else do we publish news that are not release updates? But because for releases, I'm just subscribing to the GitHub RSS feed. But then what I find really interesting is like, okay, like when is our OKD working group meetings in person, or like there was some stuff about last year about FOSDEM, where there were some presentations, or in general when like presentations are happening. So where do we publish those, if not on a social media presence? I'm sorry if my note here does not answer any questions, by the way.
No, I think it poses more questions, which is really what this does, is it poses questions if we start talking about this. You know, I've been posting to Twitter, but you know, it's not like we're consistently like we have a lot of stuff coming out that we want that gives us a Twitter. We're not building that social grid connectivity.
Yes, and at the same time, we're not trying to sell anything.
Right.
Like exactly. we're not a product. It's just an open source project that people should learn about. But it's not like we're have to announce new product features or stuff like that.
Yeah, Elmiko.
Yeah, so I guess like what I could say is maybe for the next community meeting, why don't I put together like a little like summary document that we could at least use as a discussion point. I can talk about kind of what Mastodon is, maybe some of the servers that we might consider, and also contrast it with like some of the usage patterns we have with Twitter, and just give us something to think about. Like, do we want to do that? And then do we want to like automate something where it's like you post to Twitter and it just automatically posts to Mastodon as well? Like, so just something to think about for for the future.
Is the Mastodon API pretty well? I mean, if it's decentralized, I'm assuming the API is pretty well hashed out and solid.
Yeah,
okay.
People have already done this too. There are other organizations, especially with what's gone on recently with Twitter, there are a lot of organizations that have started to set up alternative presences in what's called the Fediverse, which is how they refer to the network of Mastodon servers that are linked together. And people have already set up like replicators that just replicate stuff from their Twitter, and just when they tweet something, it goes out onto Mastodon as well. So I don't necessarily think that Mastodon will become this two-way communication pathway where we're having to like do a lot of stuff with it, but it might be another place just for us to broadcast information. And then probably, and I just looked quickly to see Matthew Miller, who's like the Fedora lead. He happens to have a Mastodon account on the same instance that I'm on, which is a FOSS-based instance. So that might be something where it's like, well, you're talking to a community of like 40 or 50,000 people who are all there because they're interested in like open source software. So it's like, if we choose a server that probably gets us to most of the people who might be curious to read about this stuff, that could go a long way towards doing what we want to do anyways. So, but I'll put all this in the doc.
Yeah, if you could, that'd be fantastic. Okay, we are at time. The only other thing that I wanted to mention real quick is Zoom feedback. Are folks cool? Okay, that sounds good. And then the other thing is Summit was just announced in Boston. Do we want to reach out to our liaison person to make sure that we get some space at Summit? Thumbs up? Yes? Okay. All right. Cool. We will do that. That'll be part of the invite is to talk. I didn't see when submissions are due by, but I'll look at that real quick when we get off this call. Any last minute things before we're done with the meeting?
Yes, I have one last thing. I guess like similar to the Fedora Foundation, I guess they do a lot of projects. Is there a process or a way I could maybe write a proposal for a project with OKD? Back in Raleigh, North Carolina, I was part of a grant award for $1.1 million from North Carolina Central to focus on dealing with the pipeline for DevOps, DevSecOps, and ML ops. And it's just 3 students, but I'm thinking if we could use OKD as a learning platform so they can learn is what I'm trying to do. So, Red Hat was, written in there, do it with Mass Open Cloud, but, I would love to do it with OKD. So I don't know how to do that. So that's what I'm asking. Is there a procedure? Because the grant may start next semester. But again, I don't know my status with me being in Qatar. I have to figure that out again. But yeah, Operate First sounds like a good link. Sounds like a great link to help some high school students, undergraduates, try to get into this.
Cool. All right. Well, we can also add this because there's probably a longer discussion that can be had about this. So let's add that to the next agenda for the meeting in December. So,
okay.
Awesome. Thanks, folks. This was a great meeting. And you'll notice the videos are going to start going up much quicker now. They'll actually be up in like a day or 2. So we'll get this up pretty quick. All right. I'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. All right.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Right, bye-bye.
Later.
Take care. See you later.
Thanks. Talk to you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.